Have you ever wished you could spot danger before it actually happens? Well, it's a skill paramedics and first responders absolutely have to master. I mean, they're making life-or-death calls in seconds. Today, we're going to dive right into their playbook, giving you a powerful new way to read human behavior.
All right, let's start with a little test. Put yourself in the shoes of a first responder arriving on a scene. You have to figure out, and fast, who poses the most immediate threat. So, which is it? A, the person who's sitting but their fists are clenched and they're talking erratically. B, someone just standing there, arms crossed. C, a really big person sitting quietly with a blank expression. Or D, someone crying who seems confused and can't even remember their own birthday. Take a second. By the end of this, you're not only going to know the answer for sure, but you'll understand exactly why.
You know, the thing that all the research makes crystal clear is that stress is a total wild card. The potential for violence isn't something you can pin on a certain type of person, or even just the patient. It can push anyone, the patient, a worried family member, even just a bystander, into a state of anger or aggression.
So, to crack that puzzle we started with, we first have to learn how to decode the unspoken language of agitation. These are the specific, observable behaviors that professionals are trained to spot, the red flags that tell them a situation is about to boil over.
Okay, this first one is fascinating because it's so not what you'd expect. It's called the fighting stance. And no, it's not the face-to-face, chest-out confrontation you see in movies. It's when a person stands kind of sideways to you. Paramedics are taught to see this as a huge indicator that someone is getting ready to lunge or attack.
And beyond that stance, there's a whole cluster of other signs that point to rising danger. As you can see here, these are all active behaviors. We're talking about a visibly tense body, tightly clenched fists, or that restless pacing back and forth. And verbally, listen for speech that gets loud or erratic or starts getting obscene. These aren't just signs of a bad mood. They're signs that the pressure inside is hitting a boiling point.
All right, so we've got the real signals. But, and this is just as important, we need to talk about the misleading cues. You know, the stereotypes our brains jump to as dangerous shortcuts in a tense situation. In a high-stakes moment, those shortcuts can be dead wrong.
And this right here is one of the biggest myths we need to bust. The source material is incredibly clear on this, and it's worth saying again, there is absolutely no correlation between a person's size and their potential for violence. The gentle giant, the aggressive smaller person, they're not just cliches. They're a real-world reminder that it's all about behavior, not appearance.
So let's put these side by side. The contrast is perfect. On one side, you have misleading cues, like body size or even crying, which can send you down a totally wrong path. Crying, for example, often points to depression, and that is a very different emotional state from the active, forward-moving energy of agitation that you see with things like clenched fists or a fighting stance.
But here's the crucial little detail. That doesn't mean a depressed person is never a threat. The absolute key is watching for the shift, that critical moment when passive sadness could transform into active agitation. You have to keep observing because these situations are never static.
All right, we've separated the real signals from the static. Now it's time to bring it all together and finally solve our original puzzle.
So let's look at that question one more time. You remember the options, right? Clenched fists and erratic speech, crossed arms, large size, or crying. Now that you know about active agitation and misleading stereotypes, has your answer changed? Is the most dangerous scenario becoming a bit clearer?
See, the secret to a really accurate threat assessment isn't about finding one single thing. It's about spotting a cluster of these warning signs. One sign on its own might mean nothing, but when you see two or more of those active warning signs happening together, well, now you're seeing a pattern emerge.
And that is precisely why answer A is the one to worry about. Let's break it down. Okay, the person is sitting. That's a neutral posture, could be anything. But add in the clenched fists. That's a huge warning sign. Then you layer on top of that the erratic speech, another powerful red flag. It's this combination of two active escalating behaviors that makes the whole situation so volatile.
So yep, the correct answer is A. But why not the others? Well, think about it. Option B, with the crossed arms, that's usually defensive, not aggressive. Option C relies completely on that myth about physical size we just busted. And option D, with the crying and memory loss, that points more towards depression or a medical problem. It just doesn't have those active signs of agitation we've been talking about.
Okay, so let's boil all of this down into 4 simple, powerful rules you can actually use. First, always look for a cluster of behaviors, not just one. Second, that sideways fighting stance is a major red flag.
Third, consciously force yourself to ignore physical size as a threat indicator. And finally, always remember that active agitation is way more predictive of what's about to happen than passive emotion is. And this, for me, is the really interesting part. This knowledge isn't just for first responders on some crazy call. I mean, it applies to tense negotiations in the boardroom, to disagreements around the dinner table, really to any situation where human stress is a factor. So the question I'll leave you with is this: what subtle signs of agitation, in other people or maybe even in yourself, have you been missing this whole time?